Season 5. Season 5. Season 5. Season 5. The final season. You know, you know, after you've been doing something like this for a while, just reviewing something out of a franchise for God knows how long. Uh, I'm exaggerating. It's been like 2 months, if that. But it'll be nice to be able to do something else after I'm done with this. Cause yeah, I'm sick of talking about Star Wars. I'm I'm getting tired of it. But I'm gonna try not to phone this one in. I'm going to try and come up with something good. So season 5 starts out basically where season 4 left off, with Darth Maul and Savage Opress um, on the run. The Jedi are hunting them, and they're basically what they basically do is they recruit a handful of pirates who were previously under the management of a really fun character that goes back all the way to season 1, called Hondo, who's voiced by Jim Cummings. He's this, I mean, he has this kind of Ricardo Montalban caricature kind of voice, where where he's kind of like Jack Sparrow. He's only interested in personal satisfaction, but at the same time he's a lot of fun. I mean he has this very humorous personality that's that really it really does bring all kinds of life to the episodes that he's in. So basically, he's given this ultimatum by Darth Maul, saying like, some of your people have already joined me. Now you join me or you die. He of course says no, because he does not want to play second banana to these two to these two Sith Lords. So basically, what happens is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this female Jedi come to his rescue, and Hondo eventually regains control of his men. But the female Jedi that Obi-Wan is traveling with, she's killed kind of brutally. She's knocked against the wall, and Savage Opress, the Clancy Brown Sith Lord, basically charges at her and impales her with his head horns, and she's killed. I can't really feel that bad about her being killed, but since we barely got to know her, but it does lead to a pretty cool two-way sword fight between, or a three-way sword fight between Obi-Wan and the two brothers. It's a little too fast. It reeks a little too much of choreography, but I mean the moves look too. I don't really think the human brain could respond this fast to the moves that these characters are pulling off, and in such close quarters too, because they're essentially fighting in this hallway. Um, I don't know, but Obi-Wan chops off Savage Opress's arm, and Darth Maul's leg gets blasted off, or one of his robotic legs gets blasted off by the pirates once Hondo gets them back on his side. Um, and and he and Savage Opress basically barely escape. They escape in this they escape in an escape pod. Um, and that's basically the last we see of them for a while, until later in the season. And let's see. Um, the next episode arc is basically it's kind of reminiscent of um of the Rebel Alliance in that Kenobi, Skywalker, and Ahsoka go to this planet where Lux Bonteri is. Lux being Ahsoka's friend slash possible love interest. I don't care. Who has fallen in with this resistance? Who is opposing their tyrannical king, who has sided with the Separatists, and basically the Jedi have this mandate to stay out, mostly out of direct combat. They don't really want to send a battalion in for some reason. They don't want to send a battalion of clones in, so they are basically tasked with training these resistance fighters to basically take back their own planet. And on the surface, that sounds kind of interesting, but the whole arc just reeks of mediocrity. I mean, it just reeks of, okay, we've seen this before. We do get some interesting battles where the resistance fighters basically resort to guerrilla warfare once they actually get into the capital city. But for the most part, it's just we've seen two-dimensional rulers like this before in previous episodes. As a matter of fact, we've seen fighter characters like this before, and really it just all amounts to, you know what it is? It's basically like the underwater episodes from season 3, except if it was stretched out over 4 episodes. I said initially the underwater episodes took too long, being 3 episodes. They could have just done it with 2, but here the characters are basically the same. They're basically doing the same kind of thing where they're trying to establish a new rule over their planets, and the Jedi are basically not quite bearing witness, but they go beyond bearing witness. They're kind of helping, while trying to stay out of it as much as possible. I just did not care about that episode. The planet itself just looks like Naboo, just in terms of the architecture going around. It looks like a cross between Naboo and Tatooine, the desert planet from the movies. There's not really a whole lot of interesting things to look at on this planet, so it's not a bad series of episodes, but it's just so adequate. It's just 4 episodes of adequacy, and by the end of it, when they kill one of the characters off, when they kill one of the resistance fighters off, you can't really feel sad, or I didn't feel sad. Maybe it's because I'm very cold-hearted, but I don't know. It just was this huge feeling of been there, done that. But the next episode arc is also, I give them credit for trying something new, but it also raises all kinds of questions in my mind. It's this episode arc focusing on this group of Jedi, on this group of young Jedi learners who they're not apprentices. They're like 10. They're like 10 or 12, and they're basically, and the arc starts with them going to this ice planet, this snow planet, and going into these caves to get the crystals for their lightsabers, and at the same time to go on this kind of spiritual quest, because Yoda basically tells them only you can find your crystal, only you know the way. But the catch is, the doorway into the caves freezes up after a certain amount of time. So Yoda and Ahsoka are like, all right, you better go into these dark and scary caves where you will face all kinds of emotional turmoil. and you have to be back by a certain time, otherwise you'll be stuck in there for a day or two and probably freeze to death. So I'm just thinking to myself, are the Jedi just horrible people? I mean, they take these kids to the snow planet. They take these kids into their temple, and say, you are going to become a Jedi because you are strong with the Force. And then they send these kids into these life-threatening situations, and I'm just thinking, maybe this is a little too much for children. Maybe. And by the end of the episode, it all turns out to be a lie. It turns out the ice that encompasses the doorway of the caves can easily be broken. I really hated the Jedi system in this episode. I really hated Yoda in this episode because he doesn't seem to have any kind of problems with this. Neither does Ahsoka, for that matter. I don't even know why she's there, but I was not okay with that. And the following episode is also, I also have a gripe about it. It basically deals, for the following two episodes, it basically deals with with these young Jedi and Ahsoka coming under attack by Hondo, the really fun pirate. But the thing is, for him to attack children to get their supposedly valuable lightsaber crystals, for him to attack children and then essentially capture Ahsoka and hold her for some kind of ransom or some kind of price afterwards, after he didn't get his precious lightsaber crystals. I actually found that to be kind of out of character because he has had interactions with the main characters before. He's had interactions with the Jedi before, and he knows that doing something like this will probably incur the wrath of the Jedi upon him. And not only that, it just seems to contradict his laid back attitude. It just seems to go into needlessly dark and creepy territory with this character that is forgotten about in the following episode, which is the conclusion to this 4-episode arc, where he comes under attack by General Grievous, and he has to form a reluctant alliance between himself and the Jedi and the young Jedi, in order to counter the threat of General Grievous. And General Grievous is still not intimidating. He's not scary. He still sounds like the Cookie Monster. He still can't do anything. Really, the only 2 points where I actually did find him to be rather effective was when Kit Fisto stumbled upon his lair in season 1, and when he led the charge against the massacre of the Night Sisters in season 4. Those are the only 2 times where I found him to be any kind of legitimate threat. Whereas in the micro series, the Tartakovsky series, he was this seemingly unbeatable force. He was this monster. He was this very monosyllabic. He was this very monosyllabic creature. The Jedi did not know where he came from, and he was taking on like 5 Jedi at once and winning. I don't know why they felt the need to go with the movie version of his character. Maybe it's for the sake of consistency, because this series is trying to stay more consistent in terms of certain aspects with the movies. But I don't know. It just he does not do anything for me as a bad guy. He's not scary. He's not intimidating. They tried. I mean, they sometimes try to make him intimidating by having him kill or kidnap a Jedi, but they are few and far between, and even then, you still don't actually believe that he can win. All right, so that happens, and the following 4, is it 4? Yeah, it's Oh my god. It's four episodes of these are the worst episodes of the series. These are the worst 4 episodes of the series. I don't mean to engage in hyperbole, but these 4 episodes are the worst episodes in the series, and I'll tell you why. It's because it details um, R2D2 and these 4 other astromech droids um, being sent on this secret mission to gather intelligence on this separatist ship, and they are led by this tiny little general. This tiny little he's basically the size of the little mini people that they interacted with in season 4, but he's this tiny little general. He's basically he looks kind of like Jiminy Cricket, except not nearly as charming. Um, it's this. I really hated this little guy because what he does is he's kind of like General Krell from season 4, the the uh, the Jedi that really mistreated the clones, but this guy is mistreating the droids, um, and the droids are not the same as the clones in terms of how invested the audience can get in them, in my opinion, because the droids just beep at him. He's talking, and then the droids are just beeping at him, and it's 4 episodes of that, and plus this guy is not likable at all. He's like I'm trying to think of someone to compare him to. He's like Patton crossed with Napoleon, but make it really cartoonish. He's just he really got on my nerves as to how two-dimensional and petty and unlikable he was, and he's constantly having to be saved by these droids, and he's constantly blaming them for his hardships. He is really, really irritating, and before the droids go, they're outfitted with these kind of improved weapons, but the outfitter is this really weird jellyfish-looking guy, who's, I mean, he's this scientist guy who floats around, but the thing is, every time he approaches the droids, it looks like he's having a hard-on for him, because he's like, oh yes, that will do nicely. And I'm watching this episode going, are you kidding me? Are you serious with this guy? He's out of nowhere. This really fey, odd-sounding guy, odd-looking and odd-sounding guy. I didn't even know how to respond to him. Is he supposed to be funny? Is he supposed to be creepy? I don't know. But it's just 4 episodes of this little Patton alien go getting stranded on this barren wasteland planet with the droids after gathering the necessary intelligence, and then coming into contact with a clone who has lost his memory. Already this seems like kind of a retread of the deserter clone that we saw in season 2, but unlike that clone, this one has lost his memory after I guess being clunked on the head. He apparently comes from this really devastating battle that we never get to see. Wouldn't it have been nice to see that battle? Because they talk about this battle that like it was one of the most brutal defeats in the history of the war. I mean, the clones were massacred, and I'm just thinking to myself, why can't we see an episode arc about that? Because that sounds way more interesting than this. And this clone has basically lost his memory. He's been tricked. I mean, he's been manipulated by this by this diner guy who into essentially being this really low paid hired help, and the little patent alien guy says to him, "You're a clone of the Republic," and this clone basically dies, securing their escape from this wasteland planet. And I'm thinking, this clone who has lost his memory and is trying to regain his memory and his place in the war. You could build an entire episode arc about that, and like I said a second ago, you could also build an entire episode arc around that really devastating battle in the Republic. You could have this really desperate situation. It could be like Zulu without the happy ending, where eventually the Republic forces after 3 or 4 episodes of fighting are just completely overrun. You could have this kind of like the 300 Spartans, just completely obliterated. It might be somewhat too depressing for a kids show, but even so, it's way more interesting than the crap that they put on screen here. It's just really boring. I did not like the characters. I was not the least bit invested in the story. It was... I really hated these 4 episodes. And apparently I'm not the only one. Apparently a lot of people thought these episodes were really played out. They were really needlessly long and boring. The characters were not very well received. Oh my god. At least the next few episodes were better. It's basically picking up where the premiere left off, where Savage Opress and Darth Maul being stranded in an escape pod and eventually passing out from the cold and the lack of resources and the lack of oxygen, supposedly, and they're picked up by Death Watch, and together they kind of take over Mandalore, and while at the same time Death Watch tries to double cross them, like the Jon Favreau guy tries to double cross Darth Maul, but at the same time Darth Maul then takes over Death Watch by challenging the Jon Favreau leader to a duel. And this duel is actually really cool because not only are they fighting with their lightsabers, like Darth Maul has his red lightsaber, and the Death Watch leader has his black lightsaber. Not only are they fighting with that, but eventually the leader guy he's firing rockets at Darth Maul. He's firing these little wrist razor blades that just barely miss Darth Maul. They kind of scratch his cheek. He's firing cables at them, and eventually he's unloaded all of his weapons and at this point Darth Maul is just wailing on him with his fist. And when he's completely tired out, Darth Maul takes his black lightsaber and chops his head off, and takes over leadership of Death Watch, which divides Death Watch because Katie Sackhoff basically says she basically says, "You are a murderer," blah 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 blah, and she takes half of Death Watch with her, and she eventually teams up with Obi-Wan Kenobi to battle Darth Maul's Death Watch. And so that was actually a really cool fight and a really awesome way to go out for this Death Watch leader. And actually really dark. They don't show the head being cut off. I mean, they're kind of panning the camera around, and you see the blade come down on his neck. But just as the lightsaber collides with with his neck, the camera pans so that the actual image is blocked by some guy in the foreground. But it was a really awesome fight because it didn't reek of choreography. It was pretty rough. I mean, there was no blood, but it was pretty rough. I like the fact that it wasn't just them wailing at each other with their lightsabers. They were basically using every resource they had. Both of them were getting, or mostly the Death Watch leader was getting more desperate because he was running out of tricks. So yeah, I really like that fight, and I really like what comes soon after, where you know the Duchess of Mandalore, the pacifist Duchess who Obi-Wan was close to at one point. Darth Maul, after capturing Obi-Wan Kenobi, runs the Duchess through with his lightsaber, and Kenobi kind of falls into this depressed slump. And this is where another instance where I think the series missed an opportunity, because you could have easily devoted an entire episode of Obi-Wan kind of coming to terms with the fact that that the love of his life is dead, and how he tries to move past that and grow as a person. You could have easily devoted an entire episode to that, but in the end, it just comes down to Katie Sackhoff's character saving him and him getting off the planet, and they never come back to that. It's handled. The actual scene itself is handled well because Obi-Wan does not cry. He does not yell. He does not fly into a rage. He's just kind of sitting there. He almost looks catatonic. He's just kind of sitting there looking all like his soul has been ripped out. So I like that part, but one part that I'm kind of about is Darth Sidious, the Emperor, feels that Darth Maul and his brother are getting too powerful. They're getting too full of themselves. So he personally goes to the planet. Darth Maul is sitting on the throne with his brother at his side. His brother has a new robotic arm, and Darth Sidious is like, "Oh, you're mustering up an army to betray me," blah 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 blah. And it's this three-way lightsaber duel where the Emperor kills Clancy Brown's character, Savage Opress, and basically shoots lightning at Darth Maul and completely incapacitates him. And he's like, "I'm not going to kill you. I have other uses for you." So, and that's where it leaves off. That's where the episode ends. And I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. But that, ever since, that has not come back. That has not. They have never followed up on that because the series is over now. So I didn't really think that was a very good way for Darth Maul to go out, at least on this series. I assume he's going to come back in the new Star Wars Rebels series that the creators behind this show are working on. I assume that's where they'll pick this up, but I don't know. It just, that cliffhanger, especially after developing Darth Maul as an actual character, because in the Phantom Menace he didn't have any character. He was cool, but he didn't have any personality to him. He was just this really mean-looking ninja guy. They actually gave him a character. They gave him ambitions, and to see those ambitions taken away from him, to see all that he has accomplished crumble around him by someone that he used to trust, that actually had me on the edge of my seat. That actually got me thinking. I'm really liking this guy, and the death of his brother, the death of the Clancy Brown character. I want to see how that affects him emotionally, because and that's one thing that this show has always been rather bad about, is is they introduce these really good ideas, but they don't devote the necessary time to fully develop these ideas. Um, and the thing that kills me is that episodes like the episode with the droids and the little patent general, those could easily be excised, and those and the time spent on those episodes could be could be spent on further developing the storylines that seemingly are dropped. They could be spent on more interesting stuff. But with that said, the voice work is very good. Is still very good. Ahsoka is still a very likable protagonist. Anakin and Obi-Wan. This is the thing that really struck me about this series, both this series and the Tartakovsky series. More so with this series, is that they do a very good job of showing the friendship between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, more so than the movies. You see them make jokes. You see them kind of go on these buddy adventures. You see them get out of all sorts of scrapes together, and you see actual meaningful character interaction that helps you buy that. Yeah, these two are essentially best friends. They're essentially war buddies, and it adds much more meaning to when Alec Guinness in episode 4 says, and Anakin Skywalker was a good friend. So I really like that aspect. And the episode where Darth Maul is incapacitated by the Emperor, that was Ian Abercrombie's last episode that he recorded before passing away. And as far as a final performance go, he did a really good job. Not only does he sound more like the Emperor than he ever has, but I'm actually shocked that it's his last performance, because he just put so much energy into it. He stole that scene right out from Sam Witwer and Clancy Brown, in my opinion. Really good job, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I actually wish he was still around to further voice the character, because the character was the replacement voice for the character was Tim Curry. Tim Curry does not sound like the Emperor. He does not sound like the benevolent Chancellor. I mean, he doesn't do a bad job or anything with the 4 lines that he got before the series ended, but it's just odd casting. I mean, I really like Tim Curry, and he probably, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back for the Star Wars Rebels series, but as it stands, just going by his screen time in this show, it's just odd. The final few episodes of this show, or this season, is basically an homage to The Fugitive and a few Alfred Hitchcock movies. I'll explain, but the episode titles are The Jedi Who Knew Too Much, To Catch a Jedi, and The Wrong Jedi. Obviously referencing the names of Hitchcock's movies, like The Man Who Knew Too Much and so forth. And basically, Ahsoka is framed for killing a bomber of the Jedi Temple that was taken into Republic custody after she was caught. And these 4 episodes basically deal with her and her friends trying to prove her innocence and find out who set her up. And while these aren't perfect, they do represent a pretty strong send-off for the show. And there are I did enjoy the 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 visual the visual homages to the fugitive, the situational and visual homages to the fugitive. Like at one point, Ahsoka is running through this sewer type complex, and she's on the edge of this. She's on the edge of this. She comes to the edge of the big pipe. Skywalker's chasing her, kind of going like, come back to the temple so we can prove your innocence. And she's getting ready to jump off of the edge of this pipe, and into the infinite abyss, this seemingly bottomless pit, that encompasses the different levels of the Republic capital. Um, and it's raining, and there's water running. I half expected her to say, "I didn't kill my wife." And Skywalker to just retort with, "I don't care." That would have been a little too on the nose, I admit. but yeah, this really, like I said, at this point, Ahsoka has become a full-fledged likable character. I was really liking Ahsoka's personality at this point. I was really liking her maturity, how she's visually grown from the start of the series, and to see her put in this situation really represents how well she deals with this kind of pressure, and with this kind of uncertainty. I mean, she doesn't remain steely-eyed through it. I mean, she does nearly break down a few times because the Jedi, and the Republic, something that she has worked to serve basically all of her life, suddenly turning against her, does cause the appropriate amount of emotional turmoil. She says, like, I don't know who to trust, and yeah, it's really effective, and great voice acting by Ashley Eckstein, the voice behind Ahsoka. I mean, she really got a chance to shine this time around. Same with Matt Lanter as Anakin Skywalker. But there are problems with this episode. I think the Jedi are a little too... I think it's really out of character because they are a little too quick to turn against Ahsoka, because she eventually faces this kind of private trial where a bunch of Jedi Masters are looking at her, going like, "Did you commit this crime?" and basically trying to decide what her sentence should be, and whether she should be able to stay in the Order, whether or not they should support her. And Skywalker's like, "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" They're like, "Yeah, we have." So it's basically like the banishment scene in Thor, where Hawkins is like, "You are unworthy of these realms. You are unworthy," because Yoda gives this speech, or maybe it's not Yoda, maybe it's another Jedi, but they give this speech like you were expelled from the Jedi Order, and they take her braid, her apprentice braid, that she's worn throughout the entirety of the series. It's the same type of thing that Anakin Skywalker had going in Attack of the Clones, except here it looks less stupid because, I don't know, it just looks less stupid. Attack of the Clones, it just looked like a rat tail. But they take her braid, that she's expelled from the Jedi Order, and she's turned over to Republic custody to face trial. And basically the only one to actually stick by her, appropriately so, is her master, Anakin Skywalker, who basically once she's facing trial, once she is about to be sentenced, he goes on this little excursion into the underworld, the criminal underworld, and he comes across Asajj Ventress, who earlier in the episode arc had temporarily teamed up with Ahsoka in order to prove her innocence, because Ahsoka had essentially said that they are kindred spirits. Like, Ventress had lost her purpose in life, and Ventress had been basically crapped on a lot recently. So and Ventress had showed up because she's still a bounty hunter at this point. I wish they had done more with her, because again, I really like that character, but what can you do? It's not her story. And she just shows Ahsoka where a specific clue is, but then Ahsoka is recaptured, and Skywalker immediately suspects Ventress of setting Ahsoka up, because that is the obvious choice. But the problem with this episode, the main problem anyway, is that the Jedi do not stick up for one of their own. They basically do not gather any evidence to the contrary. They do not give her the opportunity to gather any evidence to the contrary, and they immediately say, like, you're out. You are out of the Jedi Order. We are not going to stick up for you. We are turning you over to the Republic. And I'm just like, wow, that's gratitude for you. I mean, apparently the Jedi philosophy is every man for himself. Apparently the Jedi philosophy is, we will support you. We will welcome you into our elite order of knights. But if you're suspected of doing something wrong, then you're on your own, buddy. This kind of goes back to my point that I made earlier, where Season 5 really... This might be kind of starting to develop some of the distrust that... This might be intended to further develop the distrust that Skywalker has toward them in Revenge of the Sith, but at the same time, it's kind of diminishing the reverence in which they were spoken of in the original trilogy by Obi-Wan and Yoda, because not only do they put children in these very dangerous situations that they do not understand, but they do not even support one of their own, a teenager no less, when she is convicted of doing something wrong, and she is pleading not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And they never even consider the possibility that things might not be what they seem. And the other thing I don't like about this episode arc is the real culprit is someone Ahsoka has had interaction with in the past. It is someone she is pretty close to. And while it does serve as a decent shocker, there was no setup to it. I mean, there was no setup to why this character would do this. Why this character feels this way about the Jedi Order, and just why. I mean, she says why, but we never see it. I mean, she basically says the Jedi have become corrupt. The Jedi have become tyrannical. They've lost their way. That's why I did this. But at the same time, it would have been nice to see some type of... It would have been nice to see some type of dissatisfaction with the Jedi that would have given us some type of... I'm not saying they have to give away the twist, but it would have been nice to see some type of dissatisfaction, so that this twist doesn't really seem to come out of nowhere. And another part of the twist that seems to come out of nowhere is why she would do this to someone who has been her friend up to this point. She never explains why she did this to someone who has been her friend since basically since they first met. She never elaborates on why she would condemn Ahsoka to this type of punishment. It's just... I mean, she never expresses any regret either. She never expresses any kind of any kind of second thoughts about doing this to her close friends. So that twist, I'm not sure I was behind all the way. But with that said, this episode does culminate in a very understandable rift that has been left between Ahsoka and the Jedi, and the series ends with the Jedi basically saying, "We made a mistake. We would like you back." And Skywalker even says, "I would like you back," and he's holding out her apprentice braid. And it's basically that shot in the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, where Frodo is kind of offering the ring to Aragorn. Aragorn is gonna acts like he's gonna take it and then closes Frodo's hand. It's basically that, because Ahsoka actually is gonna take the apprentice braid back, but the music swells, and eventually she just closes Skywalker's hand. And she says, "No, I'm not coming back." And what I like about this scene is it kind of answers the question of where Ahsoka is in Episode 3 in Revenge of the Sith, while at the same time keeping her alive. But also what I like about this scene and the way it kind of proceeds is that a lot of things are said, a lot of things are conveyed, a lot of emotions are conveyed, a lot of messages are conveyed, but they don't say a lot. I mean, a lot of it comes from the facial expressions. A lot of it comes from the way the scene is set up, and how it plays, and just with the vocal deliveries. I mean, these were just excellently subtle vocal performances from Ashley Eckstein and Matt Lanter, because they weren't melodramatic in the least. And to see Ahsoka, someone we've known from the beginning, someone who has always been firmly with the Jedi, suddenly walk away from something she has known her entire life, because she believes that she failed them. That is a really powerful scene, and it's honestly, I wouldn't mind if the series ended here. I wouldn't. I mean, they're talking about how they're going to release additional episodes that they came up with in early 2014. But honestly, if the series ended here, I would not mind, because that is a fantastic send off to a character that has gone through such an evolution, not just physically, but also emotionally, and how the audience has responded to her. Because there were people petitioning. I don't want to say petitioning, but there were people who just hated this character, myself included, when she was first introduced. She was horrible in the movie, but seeing her kind of evolve into this very mature, very, like I said, very likable, very likable, sympathetic character. It's just, I mean, you feel an enormous amount of empathy for her when she walks away from the Jedi Order. You don't really feel like her decision is unwarranted. And yeah, this was a fantastic scene to end on. It was just, this scene was very nearly perfect, if not completely perfect. And while season 5 may have been somewhat of a lackluster season in comparison to season 4, it still did have some very standout episodes, particularly near the end. And yeah, I just really like the way they ended it.